welcome to the show. We are talking today to Patricia Grayhall. Welcome, Patricia, to the show.
Thank you, Laura.
We're happy to talk to you. Um, so we were just talking about the possibility of an icebreaker question, and here it comes. 1994 was the first nationally recognized Gay Pride Month, which is now just called Pride. How did you spend your first Pride celebration?
Oh, my first Pride celebration was wonderful. I had just finished my internship, and my best friend David and I traveled to New York from Boston, and um, we joined the crowds of people celebrating. We marched in front of a float full of drag queens, and the speakers were blaring "Love to Love You, Baby," and
That's great.
we were smiling and had our arms around each other's shoulders and thumbs up from the crowds, and
Nice.
there were tourists from Kansas hanging out the windows snapping photos of us, and then we found suddenly we were on the TV news.
Oh, wow. Do you
Yes.
remember what you were wearing?
Oh, I imagine I probably bought one of the rainbow T-shirts to wear,
Of course.
and
Yes.
blue jeans, which were my go-to
Excellent.
attire.
Um, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that picture. That's lovely. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins, and this is the only one in the room. But I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So, like I said, we're talking today to Patricia Grayhall, medical doctor and author of Making the Rounds, Defying the Norms in Love and Medicine. Um, Patricia, your book starts off with the sentence, being a lesbian in the 1960s was considered a mental illness and for some a death sentence. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, in the 1960s, homosexuality was considered a mental illness. And I remember going to the library after I heard my mom mentioning the word lesbian because I wondered if I might be one at age 15. And when I went to the library and looked up everything I could find on homosexuality, the books said that it was a mental illness, that homosexuals led tortured lives and couldn't hold down jobs or sustain relationships.
Right.
So I was pretty bummed at that point and decided I didn't want to be a lesbian after all.
Yes. So, um, thank you for that. Let's go back a little bit to you being a kid, not 15, but younger, playing Red Rover. Red Rover, Red Rover. Hun, do you remember that game? You would say Red Rover, send somebody right over, and everybody would hold
Absolutely.
hands.
Yeah, we
Yes.
played that.
I'm sure that you were like the kid who always broke through, right?
I don't know if that's true.
I feel like you
I
must have
certainly
been, huh?
tried. Uh-huh.
But so the game is you all hold hands, like you're in teams, and two teams hold hands, and then you say to send somebody over that you think maybe won't be able to break through. And that way you add them to your team, and the team with the most people wins at the end. And so you're playing, Patricia, you're playing this game, and they sent Becky over, um, who I think I remember Becky ran like right into you, and
Yes.
you described this like fast beating heart and this thrill running through you. Was this when you realized you were attracted to girls?
It was probably the most visceral indication that I had an attraction to girls because I had a bit of a crush on Becky, but there we were together, with my flat chest on hers and, looking right into her eyes. And I remember that just feeling a real thrill at that. But I'd already always had crushes on uh, like Katharine Hepburn as Jo and Little Women,
Yeah.
and my teacher Miss Kiono, and but yes, that was probably my most um, heart fast heart beating experience.
Yeah. Well, it's very visceral in the book. Like you really get the sense of like her breath, like right there with yours. Your faces are together, and this is before you had, like you, as you said before, gone to the library and researched what a lesbian meant. So you didn't, did you know at that point that this was something you needed to conceal?
Not really. I mean, I didn't exactly know what it meant then. Um, I was younger than 15 then, and
Yeah, yeah, you were a kid
I
then,
was just a
right?
kid. I'd never
Yeah,
heard of lesbians. Nobody ever talked about it. Um, I suppose I remember in grade school that if you wore pink and green, you were queer. Queer was a very pejorative, negative term back in the
yes.
day. And I didn't want to be queer. So, but it was when,
Who were the queer kids to you? What
well,
were?
I didn't know any queer kids. I mean, it was a taunt,
Yeah,
but I didn't actually know any queer kids. And
okay.
um, it was really when I was 15 when I heard my mother say the word lesbian to my father, and I decided that it might apply to me. That's when I went to the library and looked it up. However, also at that time, I found that there was an organization called, in those books, it mentioned an organization called Daughters of Bilitis or Bilitis.
Right.
And,
Wait, so I'm going to stop you for a second because I want to
okay,
talk about that.
all right.
Um, your, sorry, my phone's ringing. I want to make sure you can hear it. Um, your friend Eileen,
Yes.
yes, you who you also had a crush on. So I don't know what number crush this was for you on a girl. Do you know?
Oh, simultaneous, probably.
Right. Okay. So you had this crush on Eileen. She was your good friend at
Yes.
that time, and your mom came in screaming at you because you were in your room with Eileen, and she was holding up the 1965 issue of The Ladder, which was a publication, the first nationally distributed lesbian publication in the United States. It was published monthly from 1956 to 1970. Um, so she came in screaming. Eileen kind of jumps up and leaves, right? Because she's like,
Right. She's horrified.
I don't want any part of what's going on
Yeah,
here, or whatever
right.
this lesbian thing is.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Yeah.
So tell me like what the impact was on you at that moment, both with Eileen and your mom and the word lesbian.
Well, I called um, the organization in San Francisco Collect when my mom wasn't home, and I asked them to send me a copy of the letter, which arrived in a plain brown envelope, and I stashed it away in my underwear drawer. But I didn't expect my mother to find it, and she did. And when she did, and she burst in, she actually accused Eileen of being the one to give it to me, which of course she wasn't. And Eileen was just horrified, so horrified she never spoke to me again,
Mm,
even though she was my good friend, which was heartbreaking for me.
yeah. Yeah.
And I thought then that the worst thing one could be was a lesbian. Um, so before that happened, I had decided that I would, as soon as I could, and when I was old enough, I'd travel to San Francisco, which apparently was where all the lesbians were, because there weren't any in Arizona as far as I was concerned.
Sure. And is it Bilitis, the daughters of
I think some people pronounce it Bilitis.
Bilitis. So let's say
Yeah.
that. So that's
Okay.
when you call the daughters of Bilitis, they were located in San Francisco.
Yes.
The
Yes.
publication was published in San Francisco.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And you were 15.
I was 15.
Yeah. And just to remind everybody who assumes that there's always been the internet and social media, there has not. And for years before that, the type of research that you did, one would actually have to walk into a library. And looking for the kind of materials you were looking for, you probably don't want to ask the front desk,
No.
right? So this is kind of
No.
a covert search for anything that talks about what you think you are,
Right.
which is someone who's attracted to women, right? A woman who's
Exactly.
attracted to women.
Right.
which at this time that was considered to be a condition, instead of a sexual or I mean a gender orient no a sexual orientation. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
It was a mental illness.
a
And
mental
at that
illness. Yeah.
time, yeah, I was pretty familiar with the library. I really liked to read a lot. So I knew how to use it. And I certainly wasn't going to go up to a librarian and
Right.
ask, I want to read about lesbians because, you know, they
Right.
probably wouldn't allow me to
No,
to
somebody
do
would have been
so.
called, I'm sure.
Probably.
Can you describe what you look like at that time for us?
um, well, my mother always made sure that I dressed conventionally as a woman, or I mean, as a girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I was required to wear dresses. I mean, we wore dresses. We had to wear dresses to school every day.
You
Um,
and your sister.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
and but when I got home, whenever I could, I'd change into my jeans. And I often in the neighborhood, I had mostly boys to play with, and so I was a bit of a tomboy. But no one would pick me out, I don't think, as being a baby dyke at that time,
A baby
because
dyke.
because I looked very conventional
Yeah.
as a girl most
You
of the
were
time.
and you were tall. Yeah.
Yes, the only thing is I was tall. I was taller than most of the boys,
Sure. And
and
kind of curvy.
not initially, but
Not
yes,
initially,
I
but he.
eventually became quite curvy,
Yeah.
and I didn't really, you know, other lesbians wouldn't necessarily recognize me as a
Right.
lesbian.
Right. So I want to talk about because the picture's kind of painted. You are feeling as though you're the only lesbian in Arizona, something that you have to keep secret, right? You don't
Yes,
feel comfortable discussing it with your family or your friends or other people that you might be attracted to. Um, and what I thought was really interesting in your book was that you kind of make a decision, when Ernesto comes into your life, that you're going to try something different. So
yes,
can you tell us about that? And let's say how old you were and what happened and how you guys met.
sure. So Ernesto was, I was 17,
Mm-hmm.
and I was taking college courses at the community college while I was a senior in high school. And I met Ernesto there. He was very he was an attractive man. He was tall and had this beautiful brown skin, which me with my fair skin, growing up in a practically all white neighborhood, I'd never, I thought his skin was beautiful. And he had these lovely white teeth, and he was really smart and clever. And I liked him, and I thought that I could be his girlfriend. And so we went out for a while, and I found, kissing him was nice. And but then we went to visit his family on the coast
Right.
in Los Angeles, and I stayed for a few days, and I had to share a room with his sister,
Mm-hmm.
who was gorgeous. And I found, I had to share the bed with her.
Right. I was about to say, what, not just the room, you were sharing a bed with her. So
Right. And,
so
and
there's this kind of older guy who really likes you enough to bring you to his family,
right,
right?
right,
And is probably thinking this is the trip where it's going to happen, right? Like we're going to
exactly.
go all the way. I'm going to like
Right.
introduce her to my family. This is it. And then you get there. What is your reaction when you realize you're going to be sharing a bed with his sister?
Well, um, well, I didn't expect my reaction, actually. I just, she got undressed right in front of me, and then it was I think it was a double bed, or I can't believe it was a twin bed, but I was really close to her, and I just found myself having, a physical reaction to that proximity.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it made me really anxious. And then the
Sure.
other thing that made me anxious, of course, is that Ernesto and I had decided that we would sneak off before going back to Phoenix on the bus and have have our first
Have
sexual
sex for the first
have
time.
sex
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
motel room. And you have to remember that back in the 60s, I was 17. A lot of my friends had already had sex. There was a lot, young people had more sex than they do now, apparently, according
Right.
to Time magazine.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, it
Yeah.
was kind of expected.
And so you knew you're sharing a bed with his sister who's turning you on, who has no idea, right, that she's
Right. She
turning you
has no
on.
idea. Yeah.
And you know that at the end of this, you're going to be expected to now go and have sex with this man
Right.
who you, and I think this is something like the difference between finding someone attractive and being attracted to them.
Hmm.
I find that a lot with women. Like I'm not attracted to women, but I find a lot of them to be really attractive.
Right.
And I can be very close and warm with those people that I find to be attractive. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical. There could be
Right.
something just about them that, and I'm very affectionate when that happens. But I don't want to sleep with them. Like I don't want to have sex with them. And I felt like that's how you were with Ernesto. Like, and you wanted it to be the other. You wanted to be attracted to him, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what was the trip to the hotel like then?
Well, it was. I was scared to death. Really. First of all, um, I wanted to make sure he had some protection because I had planned to finish college and be a scientist. The last thing I wanted to do was to be pregnant. So I really wanted to make sure that he had protection with him, um, and he assured me he did. Um, but then, when we were there and it was starting, then he wanted to first. Do some things without protection, and I just freaked out.
Yeah. So he was
I
trying to
was,
like mess around
yeah,
and
right,
like what we would consider to be foreplay
right,
now.
right. And
And you freaked out.
I freaked out, and I just said, "No, I can't do this." And he became angry and essentially stomped out of the room,
Yeah.
left with the bus tickets in hand. So,
And so how did you get home?
well, I went after him, and
Okay.
we both got on the bus together. But he sat away from me, wouldn't talk to me, never spoke to me again. Actually,
Wow. So he was pissed.
he was pissed.
Yeah. That you had you had betrayed him, that you hadn't made
Right,
good on what was kind of the contract of the visit or the
right,
trip.
right.
Um, so then I thought perhaps after that experience, you would kind of just focus on women and think, okay, this, I couldn't go, like, if I were you, I couldn't go all the way with Ernesto. This isn't happening. I'm just going to concentrate my efforts on the people that I'm genuinely attracted to. But then Chuck enters the picture, um, right? He comes next.
Yeah. So Chuck is an older man, and I meet him again on the near the campus, the college campus, where I was taking some courses out of
Mm-hmm.
high school. And so my thinking at the time, mind you, I had no one to talk to about this.
Right.
So my 17-year-old brain thought, well, maybe the problem is that I just haven't had sex with a man. And maybe if I have sex with a man, I'll, suddenly come to my senses and I'll be magically transformed into this heterosexual woman.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds absurd, but
No,
uh,
I mean, it sounds like wishful thinking.
yeah, I mean, but again, I would, I was a 17-year-old without much information. I had left all my friends to go to a different high school so I can take these college courses part time. So I didn't have any friends really, except Ernesto, who was now not speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And and I wasn't going to talk to my mother. So really, I drew this conclusion that I needed to check it out. So Chuck was pursuing me in a predatory manner, and I, eventually decided, oh well, I will go ahead and sleep with him because he told me he'd had a vasectomy, and
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have that fear of pregnancy. So I thought, well, I can try this, see how it is, and maybe it'll transform me. Who knows? So,
Right.
so I
And
did, and it didn't.
it didn't. So he worked with your mom at the
Yeah.
school, right?
Well,
I mean, in the
he
same, yeah,
yeah he taught shop at the same high school where my mother was working in administration.
right. And he lived on a bus.
Right.
You described him as an old paunchy guy,
Yeah.
right? But he was kind towards you.
He was. Yeah. He was. In a grooming, predatory sort of way.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And um, and I was also at the stage when I was separating from my mother. My
Mm-hmm.
father was chronically ill and had been out of the picture for some time, but I was separating from my mother. So Chuck actually became kind of my friend and ally um, for a while.
Yeah. Your mother eventually finds out. How does she find out?
Well, I had been disappearing some evenings after school, going and joining Chuck in his bus.
Yeah.
Um, and one day she followed me in her car,
Yeah.
and uh, I was just mortified. Yes, so she followed us in her car and caught us, and I was just mortified and humiliated. Um,
And she saw it for what it was.
yes, and
Yeah.
and she just laid into me like it was all my fault, and
Ah.
uh, really shamed me, and I pretty much carried that shame for the rest of my life, even though it really wasn't mine.
Mm-mm. Did you feel like that shame was better than the shame of being a lesbian?
Um, Gosh, I'm not sure I made the comparison at that time.
What do you think
Um,
now?
I think that I probably did. I
Mm-hmm.
was quite impressed that being lesbian was definitely a horrible thing to be.
Yeah.
And so even after Chuck, even after he told me some things that I found quite horrifying and I got rid of him essentially, um, I still went out with a man. Of course, my motivation was primarily to be with this woman that I had
Right. Right. So
fallen
this is
for.
Victor and Amal,
Right, right.
and this is now you're in college, right?
Yes, yes. I just started my freshman year of college.
Yeah. And so you're dating Victor, who I think is really hot, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, objectively speaking,
Sure. But it's a good claim for you, right? Because you can
right,
like claim this very kind of, acceptably hot guy.
right, right.
And then whatever else you kind of do, whatever interest you take will be, no one will look askance at because they'll think that you're involved with him.
Yes,
Right.
and much of the time when I went out with him, I was also double dating with Amal and her creepy boyfriend, which
Right.
and I was mostly focused on Amal, but
Right. Describe them all for us.
oh my God, she was just striking. She had been born in Syria, and she had olive skin and long auburn hair, and really very kind of brown eyes with yellow flecks. I mean,
Hmm.
she and long eyelashes, and she kind of looked like a bit like Sophia Loren. Anyway, if you recall who she
Oh,
was,
yeah. Yeah.
kind of a Syrian version. Anyway, I just thought she was gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
I think I often am attracted to women who appear to be somewhat exotic.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I was going to say between Ernesto and Amal, it sounds like, that brown olivey skin, like
right,
that's really attractive to you.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so what happens is you end up, Amal is another story because the creepy boyfriend remains creepy and you guys eventually lose touch, as far as I remember anyway, but you get pregnant, right? You're
Yes.
having sex with Victor in your attempt to like literally go straight and you end up pregnant and your mom comes in to kind of to the rescue at that point, right?
She does. I mean, I um, even though I was somewhat alienated from her with the with the Chuck episode, she did come through for me when I became pregnant. I had only one episode of unprotected sex with Victor, and that did it, unfortunately. And I
Wow.
was just finishing up my first year of college when I missed some periods and found myself to be pregnant. And at that point, I had um, spent time with Amal, who initially had this idea that we would raise this child together, which I found to be completely impractical. Um, so,
I
so
know. I love that as much as like in love with her as you were like, no, this won't work.
no,
I'm not raising a baby with you.
no, I'm not
We,
raising a baby with you.
yeah. You
Neither
didn't
was
let
it.
that override your like romantic fantasies.
Right. I mean, it was a lovely fantasy for, a few hours,
Yes.
but so I returned to Phoenix after I'd spent some time with her in El Paso. And then I, through the grapevine that women have, I found, I found actually a medical doctor in Nogales, Mexico, who was willing to do an abortion. It was horrendously expensive, $450, which in 1969 was a lot of money. And I didn't have any money, and my mother, um, with my disabled father, we weren't well off at all. So, um, but she offered to scrape it together and to come with me to Nogales to have the abortion, which I was so grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, you describe afterwards, I think, going to the House of Pancakes, and the abortion itself being traumatic, even though you were put out for it, you were asleep. That fear that you described right up until the moment that they put you out, was palpable. Like I could feel that.
Yes, well, it was especially scary being driven through Nogales, through all the back streets at night, having no idea where we were going, and then ending up in someone's house in a bedroom where I had no idea if it was sterile or
Yeah, yeah.
and receiving anesthesia under those circumstances. Yeah, it was risky.
Yes, yes. But unfortunately, it was a risk that many women had to take at that time.
Actually, many women had took far greater risks.
Yes, yes. But just backroom abortions
Right,
wherever they could,
right.
was what you did unless you were having the baby. And a
Right.
lot of women just weren't in positions to have babies or another baby or whatever the case might have
That's
been.
right. Right.
Um, you said in the book that it never occurred to you that one day you might want that baby and be in a position to raise it. What? Tell me why you wrote that.
Well, of course, at that time, I had plans I was going to become a zoologist at that time when I was pregnant. And
Mhm.
I just couldn't conceive of being able to raise a child. And my parents were not well off, and they weren't in a position to raise it. And, I had no extended family. So it just, I mean, I couldn't see beyond that. And then, of course, as I got older, and I was much more emotionally and financially capable of raising a child. The opportunity then didn't present itself.
Right.
I was working 80 hours a week, and I was never with anybody who wanted to have a child.
Right. Right.
So I ended up, I have no kids, and here I am in my 70s with with no descendants. So
Yeah, I was struck by that sentence, and I was wondering if it was something that you had regretted later.
yes,
I
I had some regrets. I didn't have any regrets that I did what I did at the time,
Sure. Yeah.
because that was the right thing for me at the time.
Yeah.
But, had it been a different circumstance, had I had a different situation in my life, I would have welcomed having a child.
Right.
So I regret that it wasn't the right time.
Um so San Francisco, let's talk about your time in at is it Aunt Pearlie? Is that her name? Is it Aunt Pearlie?
Yes,
Yeah, your aunt there. So you go there, and you're going to stay with her, but you're really going to see what's there for you, right? Well,
right,
are the lesbians here? What's that life look like? Who will I meet? And will I be like them, or you just wanted to see. You were super curious and really ambitious, I think. Like your ambition to kind of explore this and follow this through is evident when you're reading this portion of the book. So you go to Maud's, which is the bar that did you read about it in the letter?
I did. I did.
And how old were
So
you at this point?
I was 19.
19. So you're visiting your aunt who has like a boarding house, right? So you
Right.
have this kind of freedom about coming and going, and you go to Maud's, and what's your experience there?
Well, I'm underage, and so I'm thrown out
Right.
right away. I
That
mean,
was the end of that.
yeah, I didn't even get to meet as one single person except the bouncer who threw me out.
Right.
So, yeah,
Did you find in your very short time there that because you describe yourself looking different than some of the other people at the bar, like more feminine, I think is what you described.
yeah, I think uh, even back then, as you can tell from the cover of my book, I tended to dress, fairly conventionally as a woman
Yeah.
back then. It was only later on in my 20s that I donned the usual bar attire, which was jeans, flannel shirt, and fry boots.
That's the usual bar attire. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean the usual lesbian bar attire.
Right, right. No, of course, of course. You place personal ads while you're there, which is like the equivalent of getting on a dating app, right? Now, back then
Right,
that was like you literally went to or you mailed in or went to the newspaper office, or you either mailed in your ad or you went there and placed it. You could fill it out like on the counters there. I remember doing that with like when I was a kid.
right.
Um, and so what would a typical ad of yours say?
I just said that I was an attractive 19-year-old woman seeking friendship and love with other women, and I said no crazies or men, and I gave my
Okay.
phone number.
That's a pretty broad like if no crazies are men, then everybody else can apply. That's great. So then there were dates after that, right?
Yes,
You had this point at this point, you had not like made out with a woman or had a first kiss, right?
right.
So
Yeah,
you were 19, and this was going to be like the first time you were able to experience kind of what you've been like leading up to this whole time, with
exactly.
yeah. What was that first kiss like for you?
Oh, it was it was really pretty amazing. Um, I mean, I had several first kisses, which was nice. And they were all lovely and wonderful. Just it's like, oh, at last. And I remember I described one was like running outside naked through a warm rain.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just amazing. Uh,
Mm,
so I was totally confirmed in my choice to be a lesbian. Um, Although I couldn't stay in San Francisco and lead that kind of chaotic life.
right. You end up um, going to the University of Utah,
Right.
um, medical school there, right?
Yes. So that,
Uh, yeah.
yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
So, yeah, I mean, I went back to Arizona and I took my pre-med courses with a vengeance. While I had been in San Francisco, I met a woman who was both a physician and a lesbian. And coming out and meeting her gave me the confidence to go back and apply myself through the rather grueling uh, trial of pre-med and then applied to medical school. And I applied to medical school early because was running out of money, actually.
Right. Yeah.
And so I applied after 2.5 years of college. And I had a very slim chance of getting in because, first of all, it was before Title IX that guaranteed equal access to education for women.
Mm-hmm.
And, I only had 2.5 years of college. But miraculously, I was accepted at Salt Lake City because for 1 year they had a special program where they took promising students. I had nearly straight A's and high MCAT scores. And so I got in. And even though I talk about being the only one in the room, even though I was non-Mormon,
Right.
a woman, one of only 5 out of 100 in the class, and a lesbian, the only one, of course, my ambition to become a doctor outweighed my fear of being the only one in the room.
Yeah. Well, and also there were quotas, right? There could only be 5
Well,
women.
I don't
Yeah.
know that they had specific quotas, but certainly at that time, before Title IX, um, uh, medical schools and limited the number of women.
Right.
Like
Right.
I remember that talking to my dear friend David, who I met in medical school and became my wonderful friend and supporter throughout training and actually throughout my life because we're still friends.
Mm-hmm.
But there was certainly he thought it was because women didn't apply, but but as soon as Title IX happened, immediately the next class was 20 women, 25 women. Now over half of medical
Yeah.
school classes are women,
Yeah.
and 60% of doctors under 35 are women right now.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You were also you mentioned like female, non-Mormon, unmarried, lesbian, younger. But you also had a big Angela Davis afro wearing poster in your room.
Yeah. So I did a lot of reading, feminist politics and such. And Angela Davis was one of my heroes. So I had this huge poster. It was her in silhouette. You may have seen it with her fist
Mm-hmm.
in the air. That was kind of
Yes.
a classic poster. And when I came in to the apartment that I was sharing with another female medical student, she had her needlepoint smile, "God loves you" on the wall,
Right.
and she wasn't there, but I immediately went out to the car, got my Angela Davis poster, and put it up on the opposite wall.
Yes.
So
Dueling images.
dueling images, right?
um, this is the roommate that you were at some point, you talked about your lab coat being like really messy and you had been working for a number of hours and you said out loud, I need a wife. Um, and you realized that she was on to you because even there you were concealing the fact that you were a lesbian, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I mean, I had a girlfriend in San Francisco, a long
Right.
distance relationship. And yeah, I mean, she said that we were walking into class with two or three Mormon guys, and their lab coats were all clean and pressed by their wives. And here I am in my greasy, smelly lab
Yeah.
coat because no one's doing that for me. And, and, I just muttered under my breath. I don't think they heard me, but maybe they did. But she says loud for everyone to hear, well, what about that woman in San Francisco?
Yes.
So I'm like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
It really was not a good idea to be out in Salt Lake City in 1971.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
In this kind of fishbowl environment because you are a small group of women amongst all these men just trying to compete, right? And
right.
you had the grades and the work ethic, but you're still a woman. And then to be a lesbian on top of that
Hmm.
just really puts a spotlight on you that you don't want, I'm sure.
Yes, and so I actually there was a guy in my class. He had uh, graduated from Harvard. He was quite a nerd, had all this wild hair, and we were friends. We used to talk between classes, and I was sure he was gay, even though he claimed he wasn't. And I invited him to move in with me, and he accepted. He did, and you know that platonic friendship and relationship sustained both of us throughout medical school. And when he finally came out in senior year as being, as a gay man, and all through our residencies, and we even worked together afterwards.
Mm.
So that was one of my most important relationships throughout all that time.
Yeah, that's great. That's rare too
It
to
is.
have that kind of friendship.
It is. But it was a buffer too. I mean, it was. I mean, we had a sincere, deep friendship, but it was also a front. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's very
Uh,
convenient. There's a couple. They're on TikTok. I saw them on a talk show yesterday. They sleep in the same bed. They live in the same house. They share all their expenses. They call themselves a couple, but they're
mhm.
platonic,
Mhm.
and that's how they like it.
Right.
And people are kind of up in arms about it because they're like, "Well, what if you meet somebody? Like, what are you going to do then?" And they're like, "We don't care. Like, this is what we like, and it really helps with what you just said. We don't have to kind of be the subject of people like trying to come on to us because they think
Right.
we're together. And
Right.
I don't know the sexual orientation of either of them. I got the impression that they were both heterosexual, but they had this relationship that they had had since college,
Uh huh.
and they decided to just make it a formal thing and live
Right.
together and stay together, which I thought was really progressive and kind of refreshing.
Well, nowadays, there's so many um,
Yes.
ways, permutations of all the ways that people can love one another. It's just kind of refreshing to have people have so many options that I think it must be confusing at times.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I sometimes in certain rooms, Scott and I are um we're the others because we're in a heteronormative like long-term relationship,
right, right.
monogamous relationship, and people are like, "Oh, that's so last decade." you know,
Right,
to
right,
live like that. Before we end, I just want to talk a little bit about what you were up against being a young female doctor in the 70s. I know that you were working exhaustive shifts,
mhm.
but what about the environment that you were in from the other doctors and also your patients?
I think, well, certainly in medical school, I had a few negative experiences, but much of my experience was positive until I got to my internship. And I had a hellish internship. I was the only woman. And internship at that time, and when I started, I was on 36 hours off 12. On 36 hours off 12, I was chronically exhausted. And there was just, it just wasn't, it was a matter of survival. And it was pretty bad for me because sometimes I was harassed by a nurse, who was resentful of me being there as a female doctor. Or, I had residents who gave me all the worst patients, the ones requiring the most work when I was already exhausted. And it wasn't just me who had a hellish time. There was, there were 13 of us at Boston University Medical Center. One of them had a schizophrenic break during internship and was out of commission, and another one had a severe pneumonia and had to be hospitalized and was out of commission. So the rest of us had even more work to do.
Yeah.
So I would say my internship was really awful. And fortunately, I was invited to become a resident in occupational environmental medicine at the Harvard School of Public Health, and I had a wonderful time there. I just loved it.
That's great.
And I also went back and finished my internal medicine residency at another hospital that was a Tufts primary care program, and that was much better. And by then, because of Title IX, there were more women. I had some women under me as interns. Yeah, so it was hard, and I didn't have a lot of the support that my male colleagues had from their wives and girlfriends, and I felt that lack and wished that I had it too, but somehow I survived it all.
Yeah. Were you still seeing the same? Did you have the same girlfriend when you were in your internship that you had in med school?
No, I had a number of girlfriends.
A number of girlfriends. That was the problem. You just needed one who would do your ironing and washing your lab coat.
Well, not just that. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, but that would have been nice. But no, I had, I was trying to figure out what I wanted and needed in a relationship. And in fact, my book has to do with a lot about my relationships because that was what I wrote about in my journals, which I found after 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was, I was trying to figure it out. Sometimes I was, it doesn't show me in the best light because I was flawed and complicated and at times polyamorous. But the book does show the arc of my transition to maturity, where I understand the importance of trust and boundaries in a relationship and the enduring power of friendship. And then most of all, I learned not to squander love. So
nicely put.
Yeah.
This is your book here. It's Making the Rounds. This is you on the cover. Yeah?
Yes.
It's really well reviewed, so congratulations for that. It's come out last year. You used a pseudonym for writing, and you changed names in the book. Why did you do that?
Well, when I first started writing, I think I wanted to be honest and vulnerable on the page, and I felt more comfortable doing that with a pseudonym. Although now, I'm pretty much, my picture's on the back cover and I'm all over social media. So
yeah,
I'm kind of out. But the other reason was really some of my characters too. One of my main characters is a woman who's been married to a man for the last 28 years, and we're still friends. and I'm friends with him as well, but he doesn't know about our
The relationship.
relationship, and she prefers to keep it that way. So that was one main impetus. And also my partner's very private. So
Mm-hmm.
the woman I am with now and have been for 20 years, really would have preferred that I write under a pseudonym. But it's not a
Sure.
cop out,
No, no,
it's all
no. I
there.
mean, it's a lot of people decide to do that for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Was anybody in your life upset anyway?
Um, hmm, well, actually, all the people that are characters in my book that I'm still in touch with, I sent what I wrote about them to them ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
and I got no objections.
That's
So,
great. That's
yeah,
wonderful. That's what you hope for, right?
right.
Yeah, that's the dream. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We're at the end now, and you said just a second ago that you're all over social media. So tell us where people can find you.
Well, I'm on Facebook and Patricia Grayhall author, and Instagram Patricia Grayhall author, and of course my website is patriciagrayhall.com.
Great, great. Thank you so much, and thank you for this journey through your life.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Patricia Grayhall, and I felt like I was the only lesbian in Arizona.